Payments podcast from Bottomline Technologies.
Financial loss due to payment fraud is part and parcel of running a business. That is why a shocking 55% of companies agreed to in the 2021 Business Payments Barometer. Hello, my name is Jack Gianella and I am a Market Development Executive within Risk and Fraud at Bottomline, and I'm your host of today's Payments podcast episode. Bottomline's Business Payments Barometer is a research report that is now in its 6th year. It surveys 800 financial professionals from across the UK, gauging the pulse of businesses and their priorities for managing payments in the next 12 months. Today on the Payments Podcast, we'll be focusing on the key themes from this year's barometer when it comes to all things payment fraud. And to do so, I'm joined by two of my esteemed colleagues. Firstly, Omri Kletter, Global Vice President of Product and Strategy, Risk and Fraud. Hello, Omri, how are you?
I'm good. Good to be here. Good to be here with you.
And also James Richardson, Head of Market Development for Risk and Fraud. Hi, James. Nice to see you.
Hey, Jack. I'm all good. Thank you.
Good to have you both with me. So to get us kicked off into our topic, it's been some year, hasn't it? I think we'd all agree with that, some year. And when it comes to fraud, it seems evident that fraudsters are willing to use any means possible to take advantage of individuals and businesses alike, which is why businesses, we feel, have to probably stay one step ahead. I think we'd agree. So we talk about insider fraud first of all. So from the barometer, we can see that just under half of businesses have seen an increase in fraud and collusion since many of us have been working from home. Can you guys sort of summarize what type of risks we can expect to see in our new sort of remote environment? And does this truly show within the results of the barometer, do we think? James, should we start with you, for example?
Yeah, Jack, great question and introduction to the topic. Here's the thing. I am not at all surprised. That's the scary reality of the situation. To talk about 57% of large businesses seeing an increase in fraudulent payment activity, we should not be surprised at that. And one of the reasons why is, whilst this has created challenges to security teams, it's created opportunity to fraudsters. It's created that the whole new working dynamic has created an opportunity for people to take full advantage of the conditions. The playing fields have changed, and we've got to be really mindful of that in our year ahead. I don't think it's all doom and gloom, by the way, because I do think that COVID has really demonstrated that organisations can accelerate digital business transformation, and that has made a remarkable difference into how organisations have continued trading. But they have been forced to up their game in a number of different areas. But I think we've got to be honest with ourselves in saying that there are areas that really need to catch up.
I totally agree with James' outlook and to his point that we shouldn't be surprised. And I think, we sat last year and obviously we need always to keep our roadmap up to date, keep our investment up to date. And we saw this becoming a bigger issue. And obviously we took the relevant measurements from our side as an organization that is aiming to help corporates and banks to fight fraud and financial crime. I would say even more than that, to whom of us who've been in this industry in 2008 would remember a similar reaction to a crisis. Over there, it wasn't necessarily the working from home element, but there is the kind of, I would say, the notion of instability that triggers James' point, both the opportunity for the fraudsters to attack, but also, I would say, a bit more vulnerable by a workforce that is maybe more adjusted to that. And in addition to working from home, we're talking also about a different reality of work generally, right? We are hiring in different way. We're hiring remotely. We have more offshores and more organizations working in different industries. We're going through additional M&A. So, which, by the way, brings their own systems, their own tools, their own procedures. All these things are almost like a Patrick plate for internal fraud. And just echoing another thing that James talked about, the opportunity, I think it's also a good notion. And if we want to really be true with ourselves, really look at the mirror as an industry. Are we doing enough in terms of internal fraud? And what is the current gap with how we're addressing external fraud and internal fraud? I think this is very observant, I would say, very transparent to a certain degree. And I think good practice and good reaction to that would be to take many of the advancements we had as an industry around external fraud, which is focused on let's collect information, let's profile the relevant entities, let's address this, let's have dedicated teams, let's have investigation center, etc., etc. We should definitely address this into internal fraud. This is true for banks. This is definitely true for big, medium, and small enterprises.
So interesting, isn't it? It really is. Almost got to be honest with ourselves, if you like. If we move away from the insider bits and pieces into external cyber attacks, we saw that 70% of large businesses agreed that their company is concerned about external cyber attacks. Could you both comment on whether there's a perception that fraud is a larger business problem rather than in general?
I completely agree with that. And the comment around insider fraud, it's almost felt like a bit of a dirty phrase to use across organizations. It's got such negative connotations around it, but it's so important that people, and I like your comment around the kind of, check in the mirror, right? But it's the reflective moment is securing business payments is everybody's responsibility. It doesn't matter where you sit within the payment life cycle, whether you're involved right at the beginning for changes coming in with new suppliers, and there's a change to the way in which suppliers are going to get paid, all the way through to the individual that hits approve on a payment as it goes out the door. That entire life cycle is everyone's responsibility. And I think it's true that culturally things have certainly been more accepting within organizations that it's okay to check. It's a few years ago we were talking about the CEO fraud, business email compromises. It's also known around the world, and how the culture needs to adapt to check. Is it okay? And I'm going to phone my CEO and I'm going to phone my FD and I'm going to really make sure this payment's okay. But this is a different dynamic now, and an insider fraud. We've got to be okay with that level of comfort in challenging the individuals respectfully, because securing the payments is everyone's job.
I would start with quoting one of my best friends, Spider-Man, who tends to say, "With great power comes great responsibility." So there is definitely a relation between size and fraud as a problem. There are many aspects of that. Obviously, big organizations are more lucrative from a fraudster's point of view. Usually, there is a bigger fraud. There are additional layers of constraint. We know that small organizations have, sometimes smaller rings and hence safer rings. But there is no question about it that this is a problem across the board. One term that we really help to inject in the industry is the notion of catastrophic loss, right? And that's actually one of the things that the barometer tells very well, I think, from statistics perspective, the notion that we are moving from a part and parcel type of fraud to something that is more meaningful, almost one can say part of the modern warfare. And we need to remember that catastrophic loss for a big organization means, millions of dollars or pounds being blazed, but for a small organization, catastrophic loss could be 100K or 200K. So we need kind of the magnitude of fraud. It maybe relates more around big organization. The notion of catastrophic loss could be sometimes even to consumers. And to James' point around business payments and how we're securing business payments, we can't allow ourselves to be focused and to score, for example, only payments above certain amount or only certain scenarios. We need to make sure that we are injecting our analytics, our procedures, our tools for each and every business payments. So that's kind of my take of why we're seeing these interesting statistics. And obviously there are a few measures being addressed across the industry to stop it, from confirmation of pay to additional analytics and others. But I think this is a definitely interesting takeaway from this year's barometer.
Now, it's really interesting, Omri, and thank you for that, because I think one of the questions I was going to ask you was around what we feel that businesses can be doing about fraud. And I think that's what you're getting to. As we saw within the barometer, for example, 58%, only 58% of small businesses agree that there's more that they can be doing about payment fraud. And I was going to ask, which you're alluding to, do we think that's the right stance to take, or do we believe that there's more that businesses should be doing? So I'll pass to James at that point then. I think the point that we're making here, James, is we think that the businesses can always have a process, a way of improving their processes around protecting themselves.
Correct. And to a certain degree, we need to remember on the positive note that there is almost a perfect storm. There is a perfect storm. James started to touch about kind of the technology type of storm with cloud and SaaS being obviously, from an analytics perspective, machine learning and bigger databases with access for more data, the ability to fuse data from different sources, and there is also a revolution around how payments are being facilitated. And we know that, for example, fraud detection prefers more and more data. And we think about ISO 20022, we understand that there is actually more data opportunities and more data points that can go into the detection system. I think one of the things we'll see, if we also aim to focus here a bit, and we're seeing, by the way, when we're having multiple workshops with big corporates but also mid-size, is the notion that more and more organizations, corporates, would like to have what they call bank grade type of detection. And bank grade means that while you understand the additional or rise overall in cyber attacks, the question of how do you translate this risk into better protect your business payments means that, for example, you profile all the payments, you have the ability to interdict. How many of it's a question for all of to our audience around this virtual podcast. How many of you have the ability to interdict on a payment if there is a higher risk assessed to it? I think these type of advancements around introducing interdiction, introducing scoring, introducing additional compliance elements to payments in the business environment will become a strong and viable issue in the coming years.
Totally. And I don't think we should see that disappearing either. That it's here to stay. And, we've now got to adjust to how that continues to evolve. It's almost, kind of rating your business and appreciating that the way in which you used to do things may have been okay in the past. But when we live in a world of cloud, we live in a world of SaaS, everything gets kind of continuously updated. It used to be things would be updated, software be updated maybe once a year or every 2 years. And perhaps that's the kind of the defense mechanisms, the measures that people would put in place, their strategy for defending against payment fraud would have aligned to that. This is a new world we're living in where it is expected that you are just going to be updating, just constantly. We shouldn't be surprised in updates coming out, and businesses need to think of themselves as a 2.0 or a 3.0. How are they? The rate of change is just so significant. You've actually got to adjust your ability to consume the new information and act on the new information in a far higher speed than we've ever had to before. And that means you've got to find new areas, new sources of information so that your organization can learn. You've got to understand the different levels of technology that can help support your strategy as well. And I don't see external cyber attacks disappearing, but I do find it interesting that authorized push payment fraud is something that continues to increase year on year. and is probably one of the biggest growing threats that organisations face when it comes to payment fraud. And that, the difference between that and an external cyber attack would be someone's trying to compromise your organisation and generate, a non-authorised payment, whereas an authorised push payment fraud is trying to convince you that it's legitimate and get you to make an authorised payment. And that is far harder then for banks and for those involved in the settlement process to actually manage, because everything's real time. So that we should be mindful of both of those things and be very aware. And the barometer, I think, is very helpful in being able to see the different sizes of organisation and what their kind of response is to the different types of fraud. But certainly seeing something like authorised push payment fraud increase continuously is something for organisations to be mindful of. And actually, and I'm sure we'll talk about how the regulations are starting to change around in the UK, but it feels like there's hope. It is not a situation where we should feel like there's nothing we can do. There is very much opportunity for organisations to kind of jolt themselves into action on this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like being on your mobile banking application, isn't it? You almost can't believe that a couple of years ago you weren't able to see that the person you wanted to pay actually owned that bank account and you could confirm it inside the application. And now you can do that. Gives you that great peace of mind, doesn't it? If it's okay, I'm going to pivot us away from the fraud piece into what happens afterwards and talk about recovery rates. So we know that businesses are losing money to fraud. Can we talk around how much we're able to recover from fraud once it's actually happened? Maybe I'll come to you first, Omri.
So yeah, I agree. You start to say about confirmation of pay, and I think first of all, 58% you ask if this, obviously that's the benefit of such a strong a product as this barometer. It helps us to really see things. So obviously we need to take it almost as a starting point to our discussion. And I think, for 58% is a significant number, actually. It's more than half. But it's also, to your point, should it be higher? I think that's almost kind of implied in your question. I think what I think the statistic tells us is that it's also bigger responsibility in some cases from banks to do more, right? And we're seeing it. Confirmation would be a great example of a notion that we as an industry can do more in order to empower the end client. That would be true for consumers, also for small and medium businesses. And we're seeing, and we'll see more and more, I believe, tools where the corporates or the consumers are more involved in the fraud journey moving forward. And I think to a certain degree, we can almost imagine a scale, and if on the right-hand side, we have banks with their super sophisticated tools, and as I alluded to it before, we'll see more and more corporates adopting bank-grade type of technology. What I'm expecting us to see more capabilities coming on top of the existing tools, existing treasury tools, existing payments tool that will allude to some of foreign financial crime. So I'm expecting, as you know, we're investing heavily in making, for example, our PTX platform, our treasury platform, stronger from foreign financial crime. The notion that if I'm now executing a payment, I want my treasury or PCM tool to be able to do additional checks is critical to what we do.
Totally. Never has it been more true to say if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. And in this scenario, it matches that environment perfectly. You have got to keep with the pace. And I think this is actually, this aligns to my comment earlier about this jolt into action of thinking of a 2.0 or a 3.0. But it's not just about layering on some new things. It's about thinking I've got to be able to run faster than I've ever run before in order to match the pace of how the fraudsters are acting. And by the way, the fraudsters, they're not sitting in the UK necessarily right outside your organization watching what you do and when you go. They may well be the other side of the world. And that's the model that we all live in. And technology is on their side. Yeah, that's important to the fraudsters have got access to machine learning capabilities and advanced advanced technologies that will support their ambitions, because they're thinking of their organization, their outfit as a business, and they're trying to grow. Doesn't make it right, but it's the reality of what we're facing. So yes, people have got to. It's encouraging looking at the barometer that people want to do more. I think the question that hopefully they're thinking is, well, I want to do more. I'm ready to do more. What shall I do? And no doubt the barometer will give them some good thoughts about their peer groups, what other organisations are doing, whether they're small, medium, large, or enterprise, what people are thinking. But the key is, to consider that, if you were swimming upstream previously, you're now swimming upstream, and the current's getting faster, and that's really the mentality to sort of adjust to. There is some good news in all of this that does support the change that organisations need to make. So with some of the there was a witch super complaint raised a few years ago, which has resulted in it really attacking authorized push payment fraud. Now that's taken years, which is so frustrating for all of us in the industry to kind of wait and see how long it takes for these initiatives to roll out. But the good news is we're actually starting to see it. We're starting to see the solutions bear fruit and support consumers, and now starting to support corporates. So, I would really encourage the audience to really kind of check their sources and make sure that they've got access to the latest views of the technology that's coming down the road to support them, because it's going to be transformational and already is.
So the recovery point is sore point, I think, in the industry, and it will become even tougher with more and more vehicles moving into real-time engines. We definitely seen the shift in the UK when faster payments have been introduced, and so on and so forth. I think it's a good reminder of the importance of interdiction as a tool from a recovery perspective. The reality is that with real-time vehicles, the ability to recover is becoming a challenge because the money is already moving. We're, by the way, hearing from many of our customers talking about 4 or 5 hoops before it gets into a cash out, and the speed is so dramatically different, then it's becoming a challenge. I think the reality is that recovery is a viable tool, especially if you build a chain, a strong line of communication with your banks and banks between themselves. I'm expecting the industry and the regulator to do more around it, and I think we should definitely watch this space. But if there is something we can take from this interesting statistics from the barometer, is it underscores the importance of interdiction. To a certain degree, better be safe than sorry. And we're seeing more and more cases of transactions that should have been held for additional review before it goes into the later steps in the process, where we know it's becoming harder and harder to stop and to recover.
Well said, Omri. And the more I speak, like many of us, we'll get to speak to people out there making payments, as well as have our ear on the industry as to what's going on. And it's interesting to kind of get both sides of that coin. And there's a much greater appetite for users or approvers that just want the comfort that they know who they're paying. It's as simple as that. I want to know who I'm paying is who I'm expecting to pay. They don't want the complication. They don't want to wait 48 hours for checks. They just want to know real time, who is it that I'm paying? And when you call it out like that, it's not a big request, but these things get confused. They get confused and lost in elongated processes. The technology historically hasn't been able to support such a simple request. But the good news is those things are now starting to emerge, and confirmation of payee is, well, frankly, a fabulous answer from the industry to be able to support that for both banks and for corporates. And You know, Omri said it best about is bank grade technology that's appropriate for corporates. There's much greater appetite in organizations wanting to be more in control of their own destiny. Why? Because they may have multiple bank relationships. They want to be doing the right thing in taking more responsibility for checking, is a payment fraudulent, but also am I paying a sanctioned entity? And all of those things give greater control into the individual that's looking to make the payment. So I think a perfect storm is a brilliant phrase that encapsulates, the technology shift, the appetite from the community that are making payments, and the industry supporting it. I think we will look back at this particular moment in time in maybe 4 or 5 years, and we will look at it and think, how on earth did we accept the situation that we are in? How on earth did we accept that it's okay for us to think that we're just going to have to write off the cost for fraud? How is it okay that, half of businesses are not getting their money back? This is not an acceptable situation for us to be in 2021. But we've become desensitized to it because the organizations haven't had the control and have just been fed the answers by the banking community. Now, I do think we're in for a shake-up. I think that will happen over the next couple of years. And I think it goes back to Omri's brilliant comment about a perfect storm. It's all related. I think what we're going to see is the banks are going to be under more and more pressure to provide recovery of losses. And they're not going to want to do that and just absorb all of the cost. So there will be conditions attached to that, such as, how do you know that you're paying the person that you're meant to be paying? Now, all of this will create friction in the market, but I think it will be positive. It will provide capabilities for people making payments to actually make the decisions that they're yearning to, which is, am I paying the person that I expect to pay? If you ask most people, if you could have that control, would you accept liability? I think most people would say, yes, that's reasonable. When it becomes unreasonable is when I don't know. I could be hoodwinked. I could be convinced to make a payment to someone else. So my summary is, we should never be satisfied to give one penny away to a fraudster. For any moment in time that there's 1% left on this chart, I will remain unhappy. But I think this is something that it's going to take a shift. But it is coming together. We should hold firm on the plan. But it's going to take the industry, especially corporates, to really create the movement across the banking community to give them access, to give them what they are yearning for, because people want it, and it will make a change.
Yeah, it's so true, James. As we said, we started the podcast with businesses feel fraud is part and parcel of running their business. We want to educate that just doesn't have to be the case, does it? And we've seen within the barometer over the next 12 months, medium, large and enterprise-sized businesses are all making mitigating fraud risk their number one priority. So with that in mind, I just ask you to summarise very briefly, is there anything we haven't been through in terms of best practices that we could leave our listeners with from listening to the podcast today? Anything we haven't been over?
Don't feel alone. Yeah, don't feel alone. There is a notion, and there is a notion to take a step forward and to engage on these topics. I think engagement with other, with peers, engagement with your payments partner, with your solution vendors. This is such an important thing. We are obviously in the COVID area. We meet less face to face. We might have less interaction, and to a certain degree, this barometer, this podcast, it's all a reminder of the importance of us as a person in this industry to engage. It's also a reminder, by the way, as a final thought, that fraud is a living thing. It changes. It requires us to be up to date it requires us to change, to adapt, and constant change is the only constant in this world today.
Jack, well said, Omri. And I think I would, my perspective is also to say, don't worry, don't panic. I think it's our duty to inform people of some of the things that are out there that they should be paying attention to. My comments would be really make sure you've got a number of sources. Really reflect on your model that you've used and scrutinize it, test it, road test it, and actively look for what's coming down the roadmap from technology suppliers to help support you. And of course, we know, Bottom Line are right in the mix of that with both payments and fraud and financial crime technologies that support that. It's not just us that will be part of that puzzle, and it's also the education and the information that people can soak up. I think if I reflect back where we were a few years ago, it felt a lot more like we were at this kind of unconscious incompetence, feeling our way around what are the issues that people should be focused on. That may be unfair in some regard, but if I think of where we are now, I think the industry has a much firmer grip, and organisations has a much firmer grip of where we need to focus. Situations like COVID in the last year have no doubt accelerated both challenges and solutions. And I think we're now at a point where we can move into sort of conscious competence and really change some of the needle when it comes to the report findings. And I think I'd take comfort as well. You've got there will be organisations looking to their peer groups to see what they're doing, but just don't stand still. Actively look and find a number of sources that can help support you in your fight against financial fraud.
Absolutely, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think for me personally, for what it's worth, helping your staff be able to find this sort of fraud and error that we've all been talking about over the last X amount of minutes, utilising those technology solutions and not relying on processes. We've talked about the new remote environment, dogs and cats and children walking all over the place and able to distract, and obviously promoting different ways of working. And if there's any way that you can help your staff to cope with that sort of thing, then all the better. I'm going to put you, gents, on the spot just for your final thoughts, if that's okay, as we look to tie up today's podcast. So, James, I'll come to you first. Are you able to just sum up your main takeaways from this year's barometer in terms of fraud?
Firstly, please take the time to read it. It's a really solid barometer this year, and I've been fortunate enough to be part of the barometer for the last few years, and every year it just seems more on point. I think everywhere it's worth looking at these barometers and surveys to see what organisations are what their perspective is on certain situations. So it's compelling, it's well worth the read, and it will only take perhaps 20 minutes to read through. Create a plan, whether that plan is just to review and test, or it's review and act, but just build some momentum and really analyze what's going on around you. Never has the world looked more different in fighting fraud and financial crime than right here, right now, than any previous year when we've done this. And we always sign off saying, check your defenses and do your reviews. That it's never been more prevalent than right now. So that would be my summary. Read the report, read the barometer, check your findings, and build momentum and act.
Thank you, James. That's amazing. And yourself, Omri? Absolutely. There is almost nothing to say after that. Yeah, there is kind of it's such a good summary. I would add one thing, and I said before, it's a good reminder that fraud is a living thing. It's a good reminder that fraud and payments are not living in a bubble. They're actually part of greater forces impacting it. And there is definitely a good reason to read the barometer's results this year as a call for action. And if there is one or two critical call for actions that I really want to extract is one is what are we doing in better monitoring internal risk with all the things that are around that, to which extent we have at least the data being collected. And the second thing, do we have the ability to interdict on the payments? Have another kind of, can we say our organization is better being safe than sorry with the right controls in place? And I think the different statistics, the different questions, and the amazing answers provided back to this barometer puts these 2 points as very clear call for action as an industry. And let's have this engagement being continued.
I'd like to say a big thanks to James and Omri for joining me today. Thank you, guys. For any of our listeners that want to read the full 2021 Business Payments Barometer from Bottomline, it's now downloadable from bottomline.com. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. But in the meantime, you can listen to more episodes on all things payments at the touch of a button using your preferred podcast provider. For now, take care, and we'll see you next time.
The Payments Podcast from Bottomline Technologies.